Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today to a meeting that was postponed from the beginning of January. And therefore, we'll find that the timelines are slightly different and we may be a bit pushed in some areas, but that will be explained as we go along. For the purpose of the web, I'd like to just everybody to introduce themselves, please. So I'll start with myself. I'm Penny Jones and I'm Chair of CYP.
Peter Farley, the County Councillor for Chepstow St Mary's and Vice Chair of this committee.
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny Manager for Monmouthshire.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Cabinet Member for Education and Learning, Councillor Liz Hackett-Payne.
Matthew Gatehouse, Policy and Performance Manager, Monmouthshire County Council.
County Councillor Roger Harris, Member for Cresson Ward in Abergavenny.
County Councillor Blakeborough, Debbie Blakeborough, Member of Trellick United.
Keith Plough, Community Councillor for Mega with Undy and a Governor at Mega Primary.
Nikki Wellington, Finance Manager for CYP.
Matt Jones, Acting Access Unit Manager for CYP.
Debbie Morgan, Senior Officer CYP.
Tracy Giles, Head of Children's Services.
Jackie Morris, 21st Century Schools.
Richard Austin, Principal Officer for Inclusion.
Stephanie Hawkins, Principal Officer of Visual Learning Needs.
Annette Drew, Deputy Finance Manager for Children and Young People.
Andrew Evans, the Accountant for CYP.
Thank you all. Right, are there any apologies for absence, please? Richard?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Guppy, D Jones, Webb, Cannon James and Sarah McGuinness.
Thank you. Yes.
Also, Peter Clark, I've just seen him downstairs.
Thank you. Okay. Declarations of interest. Yes?
I'd like to declare an interest, Chair, if, as is likely, Chepstow School is discussed under some of the later items, then I will declare an interest as a governor of the school. It's a non-prejudicial interest.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Also myself, if when we get to secondary schools, King Henry VIII comes into the conversation, I am a governor of King Henry VIII School.
Thank you. So you'll fill in the associated form. Thank you. Debbie, Councillor Blakeborough.
As everybody's raising the schools, I'm a Governor of Monmouth Comp, so again, if that is discussed in detail, but I'll fill in the form.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, the next item on the agenda is to confirm and sign the minutes of the special meeting of the Children and Young People Select Committee dated the 10th of December. Can we take these minutes for accuracy, please? Is there a nominee and a seconder? Oh, yes, Councillor Blakeborough.
Just for accuracy, on page 10, under mandate 35, it's been minuted here that the committee resolved to approve the mandate. I can't remember that being the case. There was a lengthy discussion around the content of the mandate. I think a lot of us weren't happy that there was enough detail there. So I thought we'd resolved to approve that the mandate goes back for further work, but not for it to be approved.
My recollection is, but I would like this checked. My recollection is that we did pass the mandate, but that it wasn't a majority. That some people didn't, but it was that it was a majority. That it wasn't everybody who agreed, though, and there were. But we will question that. Richard, can you check through it?
I don't have my notes with me at the moment,
right.
But I'd have to go back to the office and check my notes.
Right. Okay, we will check that because none of us are very clear. We can remember the discussion, and then suddenly it came to this. So we're all interpreting it differently. Hang on a minute.
The recording, Chair.
Yeah. So shall I take these minutes as read, the rest of them, or?
Yes.
Okay. Is that all right, Councillor Blakeborough? Okay. Thank you. So can I have a seconder and a nominee, please, for the minutes? Thank you. Thank you. So it's Councillor Farley and Councillor Powell. The next item on the agenda is strategic risk assessment. This is to provide members with an overview of the current strategic risks facing the authority. This is the latest assessment that's been updated with to reflect the feedback that was given in the November and December meetings. Matthew Gatehouse is here in place of Teresa Norris, as manager of the policy and performance team. And I think, Matthew, if you could just explain what has been done to update the assessment. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Chair. Members will recall seeing an earlier copy of this document at the meeting in November, December time. At that time, it was an opportunity to look at it sort of fairly briefly, although I think fairly extensively in terms of some of the comments that came back. So a couple of things to pick up in response to that. Members quite rightly picked up on a few areas where the risk matrix in the back of the document perhaps made it quite difficult to assess risks as high level. And I think probably what that reflected was a need to update the language in that risk assessment. So in the appendix to the report, you'll see a 4x4 grid, which is page 14 of the report, page 26 of the bundle. And now the language in that categorising the impact of risks and the likelihood of risks occurring is a little bit clearer in response to member feedback. The other thing we've done in relation to that is within the body of the risk assessment itself, risks had previously just been categorised as high, medium or low. So what we've done now is incorporate the judgment of the impact and the likelihood into that. So, for example, pick up one of the first one just as an illustration on here. Services may become financially unsustainable. What we said, 2014, the likelihood of that is unlikely. We are in 14-15. It would take something pretty significant for us not to get to the end of the year. However, if that were to happen, the impact would be major. But overall, it's a low risk level because despite the potential severity of the impact, the likelihood is exceedingly unlikely. So overall, that comes out as a low risk. So that logic is applied throughout the document. Just to give that clarity so members can see how judgments have been formed. The purpose of bringing the risk assessment back today is really twofold. One of which is to inform your work programme as members moving forward. And one of the changes to the risk assessment this year compared to previous years is that the risk assessment is moving to become a live document. So at any point in time, on the hub, members can access the latest version of the risk log. So as new reports come in, new information comes to light, the risks will be adjusted, and then working with Hazel and with Richard, you're able, if necessary, to adjust your work programme accordingly to reflect that. Because the reason behind the risk assessment, picking up from the key issues there, the reason we have a risk log is that risks can be monitored by the authority, and obviously in terms of your role as scrutiny, that's key in that monitoring role. And to make that call of whether the risk controls in there, the mitigations are appropriate and proportionate, and that throughout the year you are able to hold to account senior managers and sort of respective portfolio holders. Which is the other purpose for bringing this back. When you looked at this in November, December time, it was alongside the emerging budget report. You didn't have a huge amount of time to debate it. And Hazel has invited back today a range of officers. If there are further questions in terms of challenges or holding people to account, it gives that opportunity through the session today. I mean, I don't propose, as members have seen the document previously, to run through it sort of word for word or line by line. Just to remind members that Some of the risks, what you have is the risk log that affects the whole of the council. Some of the risks are of greater relevance to this committee, and there are a range of risks in here, not least things like the financial position, which affect all services equally. So, you know, to that extent, they're equally relevant to this committee as others. So, as you look through the document, there's just a number of things that crop up for CYP in particular. Issues, risks 3A and 3B, which are on page 4 or page 16 of the bundle relating to the capital programme. Risk 4 on the same page, which is around the findings of ESTIN and CSSIW inspections, and the potential that the focus on regulatory work can sometimes take attention from what is a fairly ambitious transformation programme the council's undertaking. Risk 6 on the potential for significant harm to vulnerable children or adults. And risk 7, needs and capabilities of learners. And there's a range of other sort of risks which touch upon the committee, but those are the key ones. So in a sense, Chair, with your permission, I'd just sort of pause at that point and invite comment.
Yes, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, 8A, 8B, it looks like you've got risk levels for 8A, but there's nothing under 8B. Is that a combined risk for both of them?
Yes, the risk level are combined. It's been separated out in terms of the risk description because there are discrete issues there, but actually they're so intertwined that the risk level itself, the evidence behind it and the mitigating actions do tend to overlap both areas. So the splitting out of 8A and 8B was intended to give a degree of clarity, but without presenting them as entirely separate areas.
I just wondered if that could be mentioned somewhere. You know, because I looked at it, I thought,
yeah.
Other people looking at it might think the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, the advantage I would say now that we're moving to this live version of the document on the hub is as issues come up, not just at these points in time, but through the year, we're able to refine and improve in response to feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Breakburn.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at point 4, because as I scan through, all the risk levels tend to be medium or low, and the only high one that I can see is under point 4, with how likely is the risk level, almost certain. And that's around potential that negative findings from pending inspections will divert energy from ambitious transformations. So could you just explain a little bit more why that is still very high and what areas should we be looking towards? And then also, just in terms of, and perhaps the Cabinet member, how confident are we that the local authority will pull out of special measures?
Yeah, so if I can initially then pick up on that first point. The reason why, and almost certain, is put in there as a likelihood is if you think about where we're at with the ESTIN inspection of education at the moment, we've had that negative finding. It is a certainty, and until actually we come out of special measures and have made enough progress with those services and secured agreement of regulators that we've made sufficient progress, that will continue to be a diversion. So it will occupy the time in particular of Sarah McGuinness and her management team away from some of the other key transformation programs that they wish to secure. It's not to say the work isn't vital. It's absolutely important that there is that we're able to demonstrate that progress, but nonetheless it is time consuming for officers and for members alike. So for that reason it is a certainty in the current year that that attention gets diverted and energy is consumed. As we move into 15-16, because we have further visits, there remains a reduced likelihood, because it is our sort of belief as an authority that we've made very good progress, not least you know, if you look at the education position, the key stage 4 results up from 57 to, I forget the decimal place, but high 65s, close to 66%. So a lot of progress has been demonstrated, and I can't speak for the chief officer, but it's certainly from my position feels very positive as to the progress that has been made on the attainment side.
Thank you. Councillor Hector-Payne, would you like to come in?
Thank you very much. I don't think anybody would ever sit here and say, oh yes, we will be out of special measures, because it's quite a serious place to be, and I think we do all take that very seriously. I do agree exactly with what Matt has said, and that to be able to get out of special measures, which is what we're all trying very hard to do, is that you have to put a lot of time and effort into that, and time and effort can only, in effect, be used once. So, in effect, the officers and people involved, their time and effort is going to get us out of special measures, because that is our key aim at the moment. And once we have, obviously this year is a very vital year, knowing that Estin are coming back and we will be re-inspected. Once we get to the point where we have been re-inspected, obviously everything hopefully will then change and we'll be in a different position then. But it is quite difficult to, in effect, make that sea change from special measures to, we would obviously like to be excellent or good or excellent, but the chances of that are quite small, because you have to make small steps. And if we can get out of special measures, I think that is the way forward. But I most certainly wouldn't, I can only be realistic, and I most certainly wouldn't bet anything or hedge my bets or say anything that would in effect jinx the matter, and I've still got my fingers crossed. But we have to be very realistic about it. But I am confident that everything is in place that could possibly be in place to ensure that we do come out of special measures.
Thank you. Matthew, I think the main point why we're not challenging in depth today is that we did so in December and November, and it really coming back today was really to show us where you've changed the risk levels from high to medium, to show that we are going forward as opposed to, you know, remaining in the same place. I think an example of this is number 6, for instance, potential for significant harm. And we've got it, yes, it's a major impact, but medium risk level, because everything is in place, the safeguarding processes are in place. Generally, it's as you say, Matthew, it's an ongoing process, and it's a live document on the hub, and we would like perhaps for you to come back and keep us, or Teresa Norris obviously, to keep us informed of any major changes that may occur. But otherwise, I think as a committee, we are satisfied with the document to date. Yes, Councillor Baker.
Just one last question, just on point 2, when looking at sort of risks around meeting the budget in terms of making money, bringing in income, and I'm just aware of the youth service having to make 200,000. I'm assuming that project will keep coming back to us, because obviously by the 6th month, if no money is being made, then there needs to be a plan B. And I'm just wondering if that will come back, because that is a risky area, particularly when everybody out there is struggling to sell training. So there is a high risk that those numbers will not be made.
Yeah, I mean, I think in sort of to respond in a general way initially, I mean, as an authority, we have a number of areas now who are faced with some quite challenging income targets. You know, that's a very conscious choice on behalf of the authority, you know, to be more entrepreneurial and enterprising in our approach. However, it's stepping into territory where historically we haven't been heavily involved, bar 1 or 2 exceptions. And colleagues in Enterprise Directorate, working under Kelly, but, you know, Peter Davis, for example, are involved at the moment in pulling together and developing some real guidance and approaches to support staff and to bring in the necessary sort of expertise in our existing staff group to focus on marketing and income generation where perhaps we haven't had those skills in the past. And then in terms of the more specific point, obviously, I mean, as an issue in the risk assessment here, it's something which I think, you know, if it's the agreement of the committee through your work programme, it is worth revisiting in future years, as I would say with any areas of the risk assessment here where you either have concerns or really the evidence suggests that there's you know, a degree of activity here which is going to be quite intense and quite focused over the course of the next year, that it's really up to the committee then to put that in the work programme and invite officers back in and ensure the work is on target. So I suppose the short answer would be yes.
I would just like to add there, Councillor Brakebury, that the youth service is due to come back in May in our work programme, so we will you know, look at it then as well. Thank you very much, Matthew, for taking Teresa's place and explaining that. Next item on the agenda is 6.1, and I think, Nikki, are you going to be presenting this? 6.1 and 6.2, I think, are going to be together. Thank you. Right, page 27 of the bundle, for any of you who've got paper, and it's proposed changes to school funding formula for children and young people, and it's going to be presented by Nikki Wellington, who's CYP Finance Manager, and the purpose of this report is to update members on the proposed changes to the school funding formula for threshold payments and job evaluation, and to provide us with details of any responses received in relation to the consultation process and other proposals. So, Nikki, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Just to give members a very quick update on the background on this paper. As you're aware, we have a funding formula that funds all of our schools. We review this annually, and the School Budget Forum, along with ourselves, choose some areas to review on an annual basis. We did a full review a number of years ago and found it easier just to refine it and look at small areas every year. The areas that we've looked at this year are threshold payments and the job evaluation. If I start off with threshold payments very quickly, teaching staff have what is called as a main pay scale, M1 to M6, and then an upper pay spine, UPS 1 to UPS 3. When they get to the upper pay spine, under the old conditions, they could progress every 2 years. So they would be annually previously on the main pay scale and then every 2 years. As a funding formula, we would fund at an M6 and then we would top up teachers that were on the upper pay spine, giving them increases on a 2-year basis. The pay policy has changed now for teaching staff, which allows teaching staff to move between the pay scales more easily given performance. So it's more of a performance-related pay. So they can actually move from a main pay scale to an upper pay point, jumping 2 or 3 years progression. As the forum and as the working group looked, we were concerned that if all of our schools did this, it would put pressure on the same pot of money, and we would be distributing more out through this element rather than through other elements. So this paper in front of you is a proposal just to leave that funding effectively as it is. So we will only move on a 2-year basis when staff hit upper pay spine. As I said, it has been through with a working group. A number of our head teachers were representative on this, and it has been out for full consultation. I will say the consultation responses were low. We only had 13 out of the whole audience that we sent them out to, which is disappointing. However, I have copied and pasted those responses word for word into the appendix for you. That was the first point of the threshold payments. The second element that we were looking to change is a number of our schools went through the job evaluation process a number of years ago. This related to non-teaching staff. The whole authority went through it. Some staff received increases in pay and some staff received reductions in pay. Where school-based staff received increases in pay, we actually funded that and gave it out direct to school. So it was done on an individual basis to an individual school. In essence, a number of those staff have left, they've moved on, they've restructured the school. What the proposal is today, and agreed through the working group, was that that pay would not be taken away from schools, but just distributed on a per pupil basis, as we do most of our funding. We are protecting Mountain House. The reason that we're protecting Mountain House is that they have a higher ratio of non-teaching staff to teaching staff, given the residential nature of the house, of the school. And if we took it all away, they would lose 138,000 in funding in 1 year. So obviously we wanted to provide some kind of protection. That's the first paper, so I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Can you just remind us where we are with Mountain House from this point of view? I know that they have particular difficulties, but we keep needing to refer to Mountain House, and I just want to make sure that this element in the Mountain House situation is being managed along with all the others.
I mean, I can talk from the finance point of view, but I might want to bring my colleague, Steph Hawkins, into the other one. Yes, Mountain House, certainly from finance point of view, is being treated as all the rest of our schools.
Stephanie, would you like to have
The light doesn't work, I think, on that one, but the microphone may do. No, you can switch it on, but it just won't light up, I think.
Oh, right, okay. Yes, as you know, I've asked for apologies to leave the meeting early because I am going to a Mountain House Governors meeting this afternoon. We're fully aware of the situation that Mountain House is treated as a special case. You will be aware that Mountain House is being included in our stages 2 and 3 of the review and consultation as to the way forward in meeting the needs of all of our pupils. And it's a full document which will be released as soon as it is completed.
Thank you. I've got the answer I think I hoped I would get. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to ask Nikki, why do you think there was such a very low response? Have you had any feedback clues, or is it just we can't be bothered?
Unfortunately, when we do these consultation papers, it's not unusual to have a low response like this. If I just give a background very quickly, I had spoken at cluster meetings for the heads, so they were aware of it. I suppose you can look at the fact that they haven't responded, so therefore they're satisfied with what we are proposing. I know in the past where we have put something forward that perhaps they don't want, we have a much higher response rate. Okay. So I'm looking at it in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nikki, I was wondering, will there be implications for people who, for progression of teachers? Because, you know, MCC will actually pay for a 2-yearly increment, but if they progress quicker than that, then the schools have to pay for it. Now, obviously there are severe budgeting problems this year, so what are the implications there, please?
I think there's 2 comments I'd like to make there. First of all, we've told all schools, obviously, they have to follow the new pay performance policy. They have to follow that. Regardless of the funding, they do have to follow that. Governing bodies are responsible for the pay of the school, but I think certainly from the working group that we had, and a number of heads were represented on that, they were not worried about this because they didn't see it becoming a material issue. They didn't see that they would be progressing teachers quickly. Yes, there will, you know, obviously if they do, there are implications, but we've asked them to be sensible with it and to follow the pay performance policy.
Could I just follow that up? If a teacher is obviously merits progression, is there a comeback for that teacher? Can she go through appeal to anywhere if the school says, no, we can't afford it?
I don't know. That would be a question for HR, but I would assume that there would be an appeal. I think there's an appeal through the governing body. There is. Yes, there is actually. There's a pay performance appeal committee, so yes, they would be able to go to appeal. We are stating to all our governing bodies and all our head teachers, you know, just because you may say that you're in a deficit, you've got to treat the people fairly, and the teachers have got to be treated fairly. And if they deserve it, they need to, you know, you need to progress their pay.
Good, that's reassuring. Thank you, Nikki. Yes, Mr. Platt.
Do we compare the way we do things with adjoining other councils because of Estin, really. I mean, obviously we need to pull our socks up for the future. And one of the things we don't want to do is to lose out by reducing money on the left to see that, in fact, we have to pay it out later on because of the Estin report. I'm just thinking of the likelihood of losing good teachers if, we don't give as good as they could get elsewhere.
We do compare regularly with our other, certainly with our South East Wales counterparts, with part of the EAS, but we do compare across Wales as well. And I have to say, when we have compared, 90% are doing very similar to us. There might be a few little tweaks around the edges, but 90% are doing the same as us.
Are there any more questions on that area? Right, Nikki, I think we can then progress to the next one, which is page 47, which is a change to the delegation of SEN funding, SEN lump sum allocation for schools within Monmouthshire, about distributing the SEN, obviously providing details, again, of the response to the consultations. I think the emphasis is this is in the light of the ACORN data previously used to calculate the SEN delegated sum being no longer available. Is that right? So.
Yeah, again, very quickly, the background to this paper. Obviously, if ACORN data still existed, we would not be where we are now, and we would be continuing with our method of distribution, of which we were all happy with and the schools were happy with. ACORN have withdrawn that data, and therefore we need to look for an alternative method of distribution. This will affect the elements of the SEN lump sum that which we delegate out to schools. So schools will receive an amount of funding to look after those children with not severe learning difficulties, but with moderate learning difficulties that just need some extra support. It will not affect the band funding, the one-to-one support that is provided through another means. Again, we've been out for consultation. There was 14 responses to this consultation, and a number of areas were looked at. Our preferred option would be to use free school meal data. Again, most of the authorities do use free school meal data. We know it's not perfect. We know that there's, obviously there's not necessarily a link between free school meals and the additional learning needs. However, it's probably the most robust form of data. Just to make it clear, we're not, as I said, we're not taking any funding away, and we would have preferred to stay with ACORN data, but unfortunately that data wasn't available. Again, myself and Steph are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions, anybody? Councillor Braper.
This is a question sort of joining the two together, really. So it's looking at the cumulative impact of the funding formula changes, including SAN and the threshold payments. I could go through it, but is there any school in particular you think is going to be negatively impacted by this in terms of having a decreased budget? Is there any what's the prediction of schools in deficit under this sort of change?
That's quite a difficult question. Well, the second part of your question is quite difficult to answer. In terms of the data that's provided in the papers, this is based on our latest pupil count, which at the moment is January 14, so it is a year out of date. We're currently collecting the January 15 data, and that will be available towards the end of the month. I mean, I've looked through the both. I don't see any one individual school being affected anymore. What we've done with both of these options is trying to minimise the effect with all of our schools. Yes, there will be movements up and down, but we haven't singled out. There's not one single school. If you'd asked me that and we hadn't protected Mountain House, then obviously that would have been the obvious answer. Going forward, in terms of the school budget, we will get the funding out before half term. And we've done draft budgets with the majority of our schools already, and they're already thinking and planning about how they can afford these areas of saving. And obviously we will continue to work with our schools. Gut feeling in the first cut, I do think that we will see a number of schools in a deficit position, but then when we go back to revisit, they've usually come back with different staffing plans. They start with the gold chandeliers, and then they come back in with a light bulb. But we work with them, and you can usually, in the majority of cases, we can get to a balanced budget.
Just a question to the Cabinet Member, because obviously we are aware that there's going to be pressures on school budgets, and I guess I just want to know what your concerns are over future performance as a result of having budgets reduced.
Thank you. Can I just say the budgets are not reduced as such, but I have spoken to head teachers, and I have asked on the first point you picked up on sort of deficit, do you think this is going to affect your budget? Do you think you may go into deficit? In general, the answer is no, I don't think it will. A couple have said it may be, but we won't be the next year. And I feel quite confident as far as the standards and the performance side of things, that everything is in place to ensure that continues. An awful lot of work goes on throughout the year, and that works upon a lot of work that has happened the year before and the year before that, and for future years as well. So there's a whole work programme looking at individual targets for individual children. And that will happen anyway, because that is written into various strategic plans. It's written into improvement plans for the school, and various things are in place. The EAS, they have a business case. Targets and performance are written into their business case. And I find it very difficult to think that all that would change. It would all of a sudden come to a stop. It's not going to. And in some respects, the performance and children achieving isn't necessarily related to money. Obviously, you need a certain amount of money to be able to keep a school going, and we know that that is a fact. But it has been shown with many cases that it depends on the ethos in that school, how the children are motivated, and I feel that is very much our bonus in our schools at the moment, that push on numeracy and literacy. Again, extra money has gone into that. So I would be quite confident on that. There may be a couple of schools that go into deficit that aren't now, but again, from speaking to teachers, I think they'll come out again.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor Farley.
I'm not quite sure who I'm asking this of, but perhaps it might be partly a finance question. It may also be one for Liz as the Cabinet Member. But I'm looking at page 59 of the bundle, which is where, at the bottom bit there, an additional comment on a yes return indicated is the subheading. Are you with me? And that seems to me to make actually a very interesting and indeed telling point, because what is actually being said there is that we tend, with the best will in the world, to lump all the sort of problem areas together. So, and the charge in this paragraph is that we're lumping together free school meals and additional learning needs. And what this comment, which I think is a subtle one and a good one, is actually saying that's not necessarily a connection. There may well be, but it's not, what we're looking at is not subtle enough to really identify some of the needs that we need to be trying to address. And that has leapt out at me as a piece of thinking which is a bit different, really, from the line that we're going down. And I wonder, therefore, what answer we could give to the person who makes that point, that actually we're not discriminating. Or are we?
Looking at the work that's done with the directors group across Wales, we consulted with them as to how best we could replace the ACORN data, because we're all in the same situation. And they have chosen to go down the free school meal route. I take your point. Just because you have free school meals does not mean that you have an additional learning need or a special educational need. What it does mean, however, that in this country it's recognised as a deprivation factor. And we do know that deprivation is linked with additional learning needs. Now, our responsibility is to make sure that the schools do have a delegated lump sum so that they can use that for additional learning needs which, as our Cabinet member described, are not profound, multiple or complex, but if you like, are the stitching time that saves 9. So I do take your point, and I think the authorities across Wales are in the same dilemma, but this is the conclusion that we all came to, and it had the least disruptive influence. Having said that, out of the top 10 schools in the free school meal bans, they each had, except 9 out of 10, had a slight increase. So that was the only difference that was made.
So I take that to mean then that on an individual basis, there is the potential, if necessary, to distinguish between the two. That the child's needs are not necessarily going to be crudely related to a measure such as FSM.
No, the Code of Practice requires that we're all teachers of special educational needs. All children are treated as individual. It's not our only funding mechanism. We do have, we require schools to identify 5% of the ALPU to spend on children with special educational needs. We also have band funding at the moment, which is moving into the School Action Plus Resource Assist, which will be a better model for children to be supported as individuals or indeed as groups.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brakeburn.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking on, I've lost it now, I'm here. All right. On page 67, Equality Impact Assessment. I'm heartened to see this. So one of the categories looking at the SAN is increased employment for local people, and it suggests here that there's a possibility of maintaining and increasing staffing in schools to support CYP in mainstream setting within Monmouthshire. So I'm reading that then, schools could see or should see an increase of staff to support additional learning needs in mainstream. Have I read that correctly?
I'll start to answer, and I'm sure Steph will add to it. I wouldn't say that it will maintain staff. It will maintain staff provided the funding remains. Obviously, if a child leaves that is band funded, then unfortunately that member of staff will need to go. But the way I'm reading it is that if we did nothing, those staff would have to go anyway. That's the way I'm reading it. I don't know whether Steph wants to add anything to it.
We're working hard with our schools to ensure that capacity is built throughout the schools and across from school to school. So when we employ staff to work particularly with children with special educational needs and we enhance the capacity of the school, we pay for their training, it is our endeavour to keep them within the school and to ensure that what they have learned is shared with other colleagues. With a delegated lump sum, that's not the only way that you can enhance the capacity of your staff. There is the PDG and other resources that can be used. I think essentially what we're trying to do is, you'll be aware of the SEN workforce review currently being done by Wales, by Welsh Government. The important thing for all of us is that we are upskilling our workforce in Wales. They may not be in one of our schools, or they may be coming from one of the other Welsh schools to our schools, but we are quite a small place, and I think we have to consider this, that any upskilling we do is important for all authorities, including Monmouthshire.
Yes, you can come back and then come back now, and then come back, Councillor Powell. Thank you.
So basically you're saying that we're upskilling rather than increasing staffing to support additional learning needs in mainstream. That's what I've picked up.
Well, as the budgets, other than the slight increases that I've mentioned, with the schools that have high numbers of free school meals, will remain the same, then the delegated budget won't actually affect staffing numbers. But you must remember, the reason that we've delegated the budget to schools is so they can make the choices. The choices are in the schools' hands. They are required by the code to identify the pupils and to meet their needs, and this is one strand that we use to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I think that's an important point. It gives schools autonomy, doesn't it? Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Now, while we're talking about additional learning needs, and we hear quite a bit now about many of them being integrated into mainstream schools, as long as there is the staff to teach them there. But otherwise, we've had Mountain House. What has happened to the girls who aren't able to be integrated into mainstream and have one-to-one teaching there? Where do they go? Because Mountain House, I believe, is only boys, isn't it?
Yes. Who's going to answer that one? Stephanie?
Well, currently we have 80% of pupils who are statemented with special educational needs in our own mainstream schools, and that is to be celebrated. That is well above the Welsh average. I think that you're quite right to ask about girls with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, and currently we do not have a special school for them. We do for boys aged between 11 and 16, and I think, although not predicting what will come out in the consultation, this would be something that it would be reasonable for CYP to focus on. At the moment, we would send our girls, and we have them placed in special schools, one within Monmouthshire, and the rest would be within Penarth. We have 2 special schools that we use, but those are special schools that we buy into. But I imagine this will be a focus for the stages 2 and 3 of the review.
It's certainly a subject that we've brought up several times before. Councillor Powell, would you like to come back, did you say? No? No, fine, all right. Thank you. Right, I think basically this is going to be about members who will be informed of changes proposed to the school's admission policy and the school catchment review. And you're going to tell us about the consultation process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members should already be aware that the local authority are currently consulting on changes to its school admissions policy. That covers 2 areas at the moment. One is in relation to its criteria for how we allocate school places, and the other part that's being consulted upon within the policy is a review of school catchment areas. The consultation is underway. Recommendations produced following a series of member panel meetings, and so we are going through the consultation process. That's due to end now on the 30th of January. And the response information then will be reported back into the advisory panel on the 10th of February. That's consultation on both the catchment areas and the oversubscription criteria that we're proposing to put forward. Once the results have been analysed, any recommendations that we wish to put forward for formal approval we'll need to do so by the 15th of April of this year. They will need to be published and in the public domain by then in order for us to implement any changes for September 16 and 17. So none of these proposals that we're putting forward today would be able to be implemented prior to then. So existing arrangements will be in place for the academic year 15-16 and the rest of this academic year. The recommendations are in the report, as hopefully you would have seen, and the purpose of my attendance here today really is to consult with you and to report your feedback in as part of the consultation process. I wasn't planning to go through each individual recommendation in detail, although if there is anything in particular that you want to go through, I'm happy to do so. In terms of the school admissions policy, just to give a bit of a background there and in specific to the oversubscription criteria, when we have more applications than places available in a school, the authority has to apply a criteria to select who is to be awarded places. That criteria in its current form places priority to looked after children or previously looked after children, and we are required to do that in line with Welsh Government regulations. We then give priority to children with exceptional medical conditions, and we will liaise with the additional needs team for any applications where parents feel that their child meets that criteria. We then prioritise children with older brothers and sisters that will still be in the school at the time that the younger one will be coming through. And then we prioritise children within catchment. If we are still in a position of oversubscription after applying those 4 criteria, then we will move to distance, and that will be measured as the safest, the shortest safe walking route. Previously, we have a policy that is still in place at the moment, but changing for this coming September of as the crow flies, but we've been required to change that now to meet Welsh Government legislation. The proposed change is in relation to that criteria, and specifically in relation to changing the order of children within catchment and children with siblings at the school. At the moment, as an authority, we receive debates from different sets of parents as to some groups of parents who are within catchment want to make sure that they are receiving a priority over, for example, a child that is out of catchment but has a sibling coming through, and vice versa really. Another group of parents will have put forward to us that they have a right to express a preference for whatever school they want to go to. It doesn't necessarily have to be catchment. So if they were to do that, they would like can't say guarantee because there is a criteria to follow, but they would like firm reassurance really that the younger sibling that would come through would be able to go to that same school. So we're in the process of consultation on that at the moment. As I said, that's due to close this Friday, and a policy will either stay as it is or be amended with effect from September 2016. So I don't know whether there's any comment on that part of the consultation at the moment.
Mr. Plough.
Having lived in Culzean in the past, I mean, I find it decidedly odd that you want to change the catchment area to include Llanhennock, Tredynnwch and Llangibby in with Monmouth. Now, I'm presuming here, but obviously that would be a value benefit to Monmouthshire County Council because you're moving children in an otherwise Newport City Borough school into a Monmouthshire school. But really, I mean, you know, you're fulfilling the fact that children should be educated within their community. And I would distinctly argue that if you're 16 miles from a school, that is not your community. I mean, are you still considering this? Is it still provisional, or is it something that will happen?
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'll just briefly move to the second part of the consultation then, which is in relation to changes to catchments. As I said, you can see the proposals that are being put forward, and I would like to confirm really that these are recommendations that are going through a consultation period. I can't commit as to whether they're going to go ahead. Once we've got those, or analyse those results, it will then be put forward for decision by members. Just to go through some of the rationale really behind why we are undertaking
Matthew,
a catchment review.
can I just interrupt you there, just a minute? Those actual catchment areas that are down there were meant for the meeting at the beginning of January, and since then we've had advisory groups, and I'm just wondering if there have been any changes since then. I know that it's only for consultation at the moment, nothing is definitive, but have there been some changes? No?
No, not
That
at the
is-
moment.
that
Those,
is
those,
actually
those
as it
on that
stands.
letter are what
All
we're
right.
consulting with
Even
at the
though
moment.
this was postponed from the beginning of January?
Yes.
I'm just clarifying.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Now carry on.
So in terms of the reasoning behind our proposals, there are a number of reasons really. First of all, what we are trying to do is we are trying to align where possible primary and secondary catchments. We have a position at the moment in Monmouthshire where some schools, primary schools, have split catchment areas with secondary schools. So we are trying to align those to support transition. In relation to the areas surrounding Ask, what we are proposing is to allow those children the opportunity to attend a Monmouthshire school, and that purely is an opportunity. We're not saying that those children can't continue to follow their existing arrangements if they wanted to. The feedback that we receive from parents in that area is that a Monmouthshire school isn't really an option for them because they are currently outside of the catchment area for a Monmouthshire school, so they wouldn't receive any kind of transport assistance if they wanted to go to a Monmouthshire school. And obviously in line with bringing these areas within a catchment in Monmouthshire, what we could then see is that our pupil numbers in our schools are actually increasing because the number that are choosing to be educated out of county would have the opportunity, as I said, to be educated in county. Now, as I said, we're not proposing that the options are taken away from them to attend the schools that they've always been used to attending. We are just trying to address some of the issues from within that community where parents want their children to be educated within Monmouthshire. One final reason why we are looking at that area in particular is that Monmouth Comprehensive School is a very popular school. It takes a large number of children from across the border in Gloucestershire and Herefordshire. So after we've applied the catchment criteria within the oversubscription criteria, it then is purely down to distance on who is allocated school places. So the children in the Ask areas that we've seen an increase in demand of children coming from that area up into Monmouth, and numbers already for September are showing that is continuing to increase. They would be disadvantaged over children that are outside of Monmouthshire on the distance criteria. So I think that it's all around providing opportunities really for these Monmouthshire children.
That's all right, Mr. Plough?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Powell, followed by Councillor Farney.
Yes, you're saying then if when this comes to fruition and everything's been sorted out as best of consultation and discussion, the children already in one of the secondary schools would obviously stay there. It'll be only the change will be when they come to changing from primary school to secondary school, They wouldn't be changing them once they'd gone to secondary school. They'd stay where they were. It's just that when they come up from primary school, that's when the new criteria might come in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. This is purely around the intake for September 2016 at the earliest, so the year 6 to 7s that this change in policy would be applied.
Thank you. Councillor Farley.
Thank you. I do have a question, but I also want to acknowledge that there is a tremendous amount of work being put into this. It is notoriously complicated, and I don't suppose there will ever be an outcome that pleases everybody. But I do wonder about one or two things, and I'll take you not to any detailed proposals for any particular place, but just to the numbers. Page 71 of the bundle, about halfway through, paragraph beginning, how are the current secondary school catchment areas arranged? Are you with me? MCC is geographically comprised of 4 in-county secondary school catchment areas serving in the region of 4,749. Right, okay. Simple maths would suggest then that we should be planning for 4 secondary schools of approximately 1,200 pupils each, which would mean that a school of that size, as I understand it, is perfectly and fully viable in terms of its ability to deliver a full and balanced curriculum, stand a reasonable chance of having the resources derived by various formula to provide effective teaching and learning. But I suspect that actually that is not what we're doing. We're actually producing 4 schools of uneven sizes. And the perception, if you live as I do in Chepstow, and if you're a governor as I am in Chepstow, the perception is that the system of 4 schools has been irreversibly tilted away from the idea of an even-handed treatment of 4 schools into something different. And I just wonder if at any stage thought has been given to trying to find a balance between those 4 schools for the reasons that I've given. I know you may not be able to answer this question. I hope the Cabinet member will. We're talking about perception, and perception is very, very powerful, and particularly powerful if you're on the border where we're also squeezed with schools in England. Councillor Hackett-Payne, I know you have an answer for this, whether I like it or not.
Councillor Hackett-Payne, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Farley, for the question. As you stated right at the beginning, there is nothing simple about catchment, nothing whatsoever. And I quite often equate it to a bag of jelly, and I think that's putting it simply, because it doesn't matter what you do in one area, you cause concern in another area. And I think the only way you could ever eliminate all these concerns is to do away with catchment, but we can't do that.
I could ask why not?
Going back to the number of children we have in the county, and again, like I say, nothing is simple. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just carve it up into quarters and make 4 equal secondary schools with equal catchment areas, with equal everything? But life, unfortunately, isn't like that, and we have all sorts of things such as roads and valleys and rivers and motorways and all sorts of things that come into play when you're looking at catchment areas. Yes, we do have one particular school which is smaller than the others. That has always been the case. That school is in effect increasing in numbers, and the reason it's increasing in numbers, it has a very, very good head teacher. And the school, in effect, the numbers in the school have something to do with catchment, but also they have an awful lot to do with the head teacher, the ethos in the school, and actually whether parents want to send their children to that school. Because there are, looking in other parts of the county, exactly the opposite argument. There are schools which are seen by parents and children that live outside the county as being very good schools, and they want to come into them. So it's very, very difficult to think that to solve the problem is to change the catchment area. Equally, we have taken on board, the advisory group have taken on board the concerns of this particular school. and we have asked for a particular area. We asked the school what would help them, what would be advantageous to them, and that has been included in the consultation, and we'll see what parents think of that and what the response is, because we're most sympathetic to the smaller of the four schools, but equally we have to be realistic, and other than sort of flattening the county and dividing it up, I don't think we can do that. But there is good news there, because the head teacher is changing the way that the children are going after primary school, and very much staying within county. So I think, fair due there.
Councillor Farley, you want to come back?
Thank you. I think much of what you've said is entirely fair and reasonable, and I'm pleased that there is some credit being expressed for the work of the head at Chepstow, Claire Price. But it does remain the case that there is an imbalance, and I'm just concerned that we're not creating another set of problems by over-providing, shall we say, for example, in a neighbouring school that happens to be 21st century bound at the moment, which will skew the figures. And I just leave the point that there is a risk of over-provision just as much as there is a risk in leaving one school in particular to be relatively small. But we will see what people say, and at the end of the day, there are choices, there are preferences, and as you rightly say, there are the efforts of individual schools to attract pupils. I just hope that we're not tying any one school's hands unnecessarily. Thank you, Chair.
May I just very, very quickly say that, in effect, when we do look at the results from this consultation, it will be looked on a holistic basis, as a across the county, all county basis. So hopefully that will come into the mix there.
And can you confirm that this comes back to council, full council, for a decision?
I don't know whether it does, but it most certainly can do. I think it goes to Cabinet, in all honesty. But
Thank you. I have actually put down that we request that Deb Mountfield brings this back when the consultation period's over, so that we're more aware, and we could have further discussion on that. Yes, Councillor Bakewell.
I'm just sort of looking at the funding element, the bottom line of this review. When you were looking at the rationale, one of the rationale is to make to enable smooth transition and to encourage Monmouthshire pupils to go to Monmouthshire schools. I'm assuming then, if we encourage that, we will have more children going to the four schools, and with them the money that follows them. So overall, we will have more money going into the school budgets, because I'm aware that the transport costs are at risk of going up. So we'll be spending more money in getting them to the local schools, if you like. But I'm assuming that's being balanced by we'll have higher numbers in the school, and therefore overall higher money going into the budgets for education. That wasn't very clear, sorry. Do you understand?
That's okay. I'll ask Nikki in a moment just to address the finance element of it, but one of the key focuses for us as well is not just around the finance element, but is around the level of surplus places that we have in our schools, in particular King Henry, and you can see that we have proposals to increase King Henry's catchment, so that is a focus for us as well, to address the requirements of Welsh Government.
Yeah, just on the financing side, if we are just keeping the same number of pupils, but they are from Monmouthshire rather from the Forest, if we take, for instance, Monmouth, then no, there wouldn't be any actual funding, additional funding going into that school, because it's just replacing like. But I believe, I need to check this, I believe that the overall settlement, there is something within there, but I'm quite happy to look at that for you in terms of the effect on Monmouthshire as a whole.
Just quickly, because Mr. Clark wants to come
that
in.
would be good to have, just in terms of you know, how much extra will we get and how much we'll be spending, because budgets are really, really tight. And if this whole piece of work means that we end up spending even more money, then you have to sort of think twice whether it's a good move in these times, really, when it is difficult.
Yes, we could ask that to come back for the next consultation when Debbie comes back or Matthew, of course. Mr. Plough.
With regard to the proposal and consultation regarding this catchment change or revision, is this looked at alongside the local development plan? Because there are some areas that are going to expand increasingly over the next few years, and it would be a shame if we put a plan together, agreed it, to find that in a very near space of time it would have to be changed.
Yes, I can confirm that all of the proposals, for each of the catchment proposals, we would have looked at a set of projections on pupil numbers, and LDPs would have been built into those projections.
Thank you.
Right, I think I can conclude. Debbie did ask that this was used as a consultation process actually within Select. And so I hope that the comments that have been made will go back to her, and that, you know, we will she'll be able to return when the consultation period is completed and discuss. We can have further discussions about it with the further information from Nikki as well. But thank you, Matt, for coming in and for doing that so ably in place of Debbie. Thank you. Right, now we go to agenda item 8, and this is Child Poverty Strategy Consultation, written by the Welsh Government. So there is very little that we can actually do about it, but it's been brought before us so that we can look at it, discuss, and the comments can be returned to Welsh Government, I think, by the end of January. Of course, this was meant also at beginning of January, but we had a meeting that was postponed. So I would like opinions and comments, please.
The officer is coming in now.
Okay. I'm going to waffle a minute because the officer is on the way. I don't think Will has returned. Has he, Richard?
I think we're waiting on Sarah Harp.
So it is going to be Sarah Harp. Sarah Harp is going to present this. So on behalf of Will McLean, who's not the author, who's going to have to reply to the Welsh office. As I say, you have probably read it. Quite a funny format in that we've had a reply from the Families First Project Managers Network. But anyway, we can make of it what we can, and he can reply on our behalf. Sarah Harp is from the Policy and Partnership, but she's a project officer.
She'll be standing in for Will today.
Yes, and she's standing in for Will. So I'll let you just have 2 minutes to look over it quickly before she comes in, sorry. Yes, Councillor Farley has just suggested, very good deputy, that we go on to the work programme instead. I have something to say about the next meeting. The next meeting is quite a heavy one, unlike today, which has gone quite quickly. There are a lot of items on there that will need quite a lot of discussion, including the school transport policy, which could be quite contentious, and revenue budget monitoring. So it is down for 4:30 or 4 o'clock?
Yes,
4 or 4:30 on the 12th of February. Now, I suggest that this is quite late, and I wonder if you would be prepared to bring it forward to perhaps 2 o'clock. Now, shall we have those in agreement put their hands up? Okay. Debbie, do you agree? Mr. Plano?
I'll be on a chair cruise.
Oh, well, just put your hands up then.
Yeah, have a satellite link.
Well, we could Skype you. Yes, all right. Shall we agree to have the meeting then at 2 o'clock? And then, as it's quite heavy. Is that all right, Councillor Farley? Right, that's one thing organised. Anything else? Hazel, have you got anything to say? Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor Harris.
The only thing is that some councillors get deeply upset about things being moved from the time that's actually in the diary. So it may be worthwhile you doing a survey of the ones that aren't. I know they're not here, so they really theoretically shouldn't have a say, but they probably will leap up and down if they're not consulted.
I think I'm going to take an executive decision, and I'm going to say we are going to do it because those councillors could be here. I know that some have other meetings today, so no blame apportioned, but I think we're the majority and we can say that we're going to have it at 2 o'clock. It is quite late to start discussion of such heavy subjects, and it was made a long time ago under a previous chair, so I'm going to take the decision and we have it at 2. Is that all right? Okay, Hazel, would you like to?
The work programme is presented for you. It's a new type of work programme which I think is easier to read and navigate. Several items this afternoon that we've discussed will need to return to committee. You've suggested that you'd like Nikki to come back with the school's funding formula to have a sort of progress update on that and how the changes have affected the position with the schools. So we'll programme that in 6 months' time. I've also discussed with Deb Mountfield, who apologises today. She's actually not very well. Regarding the previous item on area catchment, and she has sort of said that it might be difficult to bring it back to select committee because of the tight timescales, and that the member advisory panel may choose to take it further. She's advised that they'll know more on the 10th of February, but it might not be possible to bring it back before the select committee. So if members have got concerns, and particularly the co-opted members of this committee, if you have particular views about what we've discussed today and the actual catchments, then I suggest you need to put those in writing, and I would put them to Deb Mountfield so that they can be incorporated through the member advisory panel, because as I said, this might not come back to your select committee for you to do it through this avenue. There are other avenues, as we've discussed. It'll probably go to cabinet. It could possibly go further to council. But either way, I think if you've got strong views at this point, then you need to put those in writing, because it might not come back to this committee. But I'll keep you posted on that. And as the chair has said, really, the 12th of February meeting is quite a lengthy meeting, and because the area catchment review kind of touches on home to school transport, we will discuss home to school transport in more detail at that meeting, but it could be that you choose to bring the meeting forward because it is a lengthy meeting. And I suggest that would be a good option. Some time ago, we did decide to add a 4:30 meeting into the calendar, and I think that was following the new administration and members who are working and so on. And it's a question of whether that suits the committee now. If you choose to move it, then that's fine. Perhaps we'll send an email to members of the committee and just sort of gauge what a general response is, and then go from there. The remainder of the work programme is as stated. Things do change. They do change on a month-by-month basis, and obviously we haven't got dates in for meetings after May, but as soon as the council diary is sort of normally put together from around February onwards, and we get a draft diary sent to council to approve. So as soon as we get those dates, we'll put them in. As most of you will be aware, you've had a lot of special meetings of this committee to deal with additional workload related to education matters. I think at some stage you might need to reflect on your work programme, which is heavily biased towards education for obvious reasons, and perhaps there are some areas that are coming through that might require greater scrutiny. Particularly, we've seen that the youth service came to the previous meeting, and there are lots of projects going on there that you need to be aware of. So they've requested to come back following the last meeting, and we've tabled those in for May. So we've also had a request to bring back performance on safeguarding children with the officer Jane Rogers. We'll be doing that in June, and we have the usual sort of improvement plan and outcome agreements then coming to us in July. I'm sure other matters will come to the fore, and they'll be programmed in as we see fit. That's
I
all
did
from
actually
me, Chair.
I request that adoption should be added to the list at some stage as well. We seem to spend
Yes.
time looking at fostering, but not the adoption
Yeah.
inspection, so perhaps that could be added.
Yeah, so I think we'll add that.
Councillor Farley, you want to answer?
Thank you.
Councillor
I mean, it is, as always, a full programme, and it's right that we should try to seek a balance across the whole portfolio. One of the things that seems to have dropped below the radar, but it might just be me and my inability to follow things closely, is this. We started a process whereby we met with the heads, particularly of the secondary schools. And I thought we had said as a committee that we'd like to look for ways of having some sort of ongoing dialogue. Now, I don't think we ever resolved what the best way of doing that might be. There were various suggestions. We might want to invite them back to meet us. We might want to visit schools. We might want to form into little groups. It doesn't matter. But the principle of trying to find some way as a committee of engaging with our heads, and not just the heads of our secondary schools as it happens, is something that I would really like us to keep in mind. It may be that it's logistically impossible, but it strikes me that we're missing a trick. We're not actually engaging directly, if you like, with the service providers, if I could put it like that.
Yes, I just add here that I think the idea of going to schools is perhaps we're not allowing the public to look in it, to scrutinise our meetings or to observe our meetings. But yes, I totally agree. We started the process and we really should be seeing them again, perhaps. The last time was in Monmouth, was it not? Under a different chair. So, yes, Councillor.
All I was going to say was that as county councillors, we're all supposed to be governors of at least one school, if not two, and a good many of the councillors are governors of the primary schools as well as secondary schools, and in those positions we should be connecting with the rest of the governors and with the schools. And it is quite difficult if you want us to go into schools, because I know we had an instance not so long ago where the governors themselves at one school wanted to have the governors going in and seeing what was going on, and we had the teachers' union stopping us from going. So I think this could be some difficulties if we tried to get into there too much. Not that they don't want us to go, but it must, I expect, disrupt things. But as governors, as councillors, we should be governors of schools, and we should interact in those positions, really.
Yeah, we've had a discussion in the past about select committee members visiting schools, and we did ask the head teachers to come before the select committee to discuss performance in the comprehensive schools. But it is a bit of a wider discussion about scrutiny's role and where it stops and where it ends. And I think the conclusion seems to be that we are the select committee, we are the formal body of the council that should be holding schools to account for performance, but that should be through the governors. So our first port of call, if we're concerned about performance, should be to query that with the governors, and then the governors then should take it up with the schools. It's not that it's a bad idea to visit schools if you want to have a feel for how a school operates, but I think challenge of schools must be done directly in council buildings where it's minuted and it's formal, rather than through sort of informal gatherings, which I think is fair to say can disrupt the schools. So,
Perhaps we could ask them to come and see us and talk about their progression. So it's put a positive spin on rather than a negative spin on. Mr. Harris.
The other thing going on from what Hazel's just said is this is the actual room that disseminates the wise sayings or whatever to anyone that cares to listen outside. So, as Hazel said, we have to be very careful if we do go outside this room. You know, we are taking away the opportunity for a wider audience to listen to what we're saying.
Exactly. That's the point I made. Right. Is that all for work programme? Yes. Sorry, Councillor Agnew.
I'm terribly sorry to butt in, but just looking at the meeting on the 12th of February, I have a feeling, and I may be completely wrong on this, but I've just checked with Matthew. I think it's actually incorrect. It says area catchment review and home to school transport policy. It's actually area catchment review and admissions policy. Right. So I just wanted to make sure that that was, whether we could just check on that. Because I don't want anybody to have any
Hello, afternoon members. Thank you. As the Chair said, I'm here on Will McLean's behalf. He's our anti-poverty champion for the authority, as I'm sure you're aware, as well as several other hats. I sit within his strategic partnership team. My role is the Families First programme manager, which, as I'm sure you're aware, Families First is one of our sort of flagship anti-poverty programmes, and under that we commission several projects and activities. The report we bring to you today is Welsh Government's Child Poverty Strategy consultation. They have an existing strategy and they're consulting on their revisions to it. The consultation deadline is the end of this week, so we're pressed for time, but we thought it important to bring it before this committee to seek views you may have. Just not to sort of read the report verbatim, which is only a summary report, but just to highlight to you really that the revised strategy reiterates Welsh Government's commitment in terms of the 3 strategic objectives in the strategy, so reducing the number of families living in workless households, improving the skills of parent carers and supporting young people so they can secure well-paid employment, and thirdly, to reduce the inequalities which exist in the health, education and economic outcomes of children and families by improving the outcomes of the poorest, is how it's stated. There are also 5 key areas which are prioritised in the revised strategy, where Welsh Government feel more should be done to support children and young people living in low-income households and to really mitigate the impacts of that poverty. Those 5 areas: food poverty, childcare, in-work poverty, action to mitigate impact of welfare reform, and housing and regeneration. There are key policies and programmes listed as being key for tackling child poverty, and these are contained within Welsh Government's wider Tackling Poverty Action Plan. Some of these are familiar to us, some of these are national, some of them unfortunately aren't applicable for Monmouthshire, particularly around European funding, and of course Communities First, which we're all aware of, the lack of relevance, as it were, in Monmouthshire. I thought it useful to present this to members in terms of the questions on the second page of the summary report, the questions set by Welsh Government for the consultation, of which there are 6. And I've also given you here the feedback that my Families First Project Managers Network came up with. These are project managers leading activity working directly with families, often our poorest or those who are about to become the poorest of the families in our area. So they're coming at it from from a management point of view, but also from a real on-the-ground level, from bringing some of that experience of our families. And at the end, I have detailed, I will structure this properly when we submit our consultation response. There were some other key issues raised by that network in terms of what we didn't feel was adequately reflected within the strategy, but certainly has been the experience we found in Monmouthshire, such as the impact of poor mental health, access to childcare being a barrier to employment, and the real importance of early education, the impact on life chances. So I'm happy to take any specific or general questions around the area, but also on the strategy consultation or this feedback to date.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to make a comment first. The Monmouthshire Families First Project Managers Network, I'm very pleased that they have in their feedback recognised rural poverty, because it's ignored far too often. And also the fact that, you know, we mustn't stereotype poverty and deprivation. It can, as noted here, be from well-paid employment, families who have lost their jobs and lost everything, and also armed forces, people who've been in the armed forces. So I'm very pleased that we're not just stereotyping and saying it's a typical family. Okay, so that was my comment. Councillor Powell.
Thank you. You almost answered my question, but at the same time, I want to know why. On page 83, bullet point 5, the one bit about European funding, and you said that doesn't apply to Monmouthshire. Why? I'm going to say no. I was going to ask how you could access it, but obviously we can't have it.
Yeah, I think it comes in several different forms. ESF, European Social Fund, particularly. I think it's true to say that it's on a par with a lot of other funding that isn't open to us, in that eligibility is based on some really strict definitions of poverty, those deprivation statistics that we debate with Welsh Government.
I mean, does this connect to the fact that they took away our Communities First area? Because we used to have a Communities First area in Abergavenny, and we no longer have that.
Yes, I believe that was removed on the, was it a recalculation of the statistics, or maybe it was more recent census information. I'm not sure which, but it's the same principle. It's looking at statistics in a crude, in a high level crude way that leaves us looking healthy and wealthy throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Blakeburn.
Thanks. Are we able to make contributions towards existing policies in Welsh Government, existing policies which don't fit within the bigger picture, really? Two in particular. I'll go to the post-16 school transport. You heard me pleading passionately at full council, but we know that there is an issue with Welsh Government when you're talking about keeping young people off the NEETs list, enabling them to access further education so they can increase their chances and opportunities, that perhaps the Welsh Government may need to look at their transport policy, because transport's not mentioned in this document at all, and it's a fundamental part, particularly in rural areas, that they should actually make it a statutory obligation that local authorities should financially support young people to get to further education, but money should come with that. That money should follow through into local authority to allow that, because it is that group that will really struggle in order to get into school. The other policy I was looking at and talking to young women who are trying to set up their own businesses, what they were suggesting is when the child gets to the age of 3 or 4, they have 15 hours a week that they can use for their child to have preschool support. And the reason for that is for children to have access to education and social interaction. But it's also, the Welsh Government said that it's to enable people to be economically profitable, to get out in the workplace. Now, you probably know this, but again, this is where a policy needs tweaking. In England, they get 15 hours and a person can decide how to use it. So they might say, right, we'll have 2 days and a little bit means I can do 2 full days work. The policy in Wales is that you have 15 hours. You've got to share it over the 5 days. So that's 3 hours a day. in a rural area, by the time you've dropped your kid off, I don't know what you're going to be doing in an hour. It's not helpful. And it's just a tweaking of that can make an awful lot of difference for a mother, particularly, to be able to have a 2-day job, or if they're setting up their own business, really get out there and do some work. So it's really looking at those two policies that seems to be out of sync with their overall strategy.
In terms of how you initially phrased or prefaced your questions, my influence, or our team's influence, is around the overall anti-poverty agenda. We're Welsh Government are holding regional workshops. We are discussing some specific policy areas, such as the ones you mentioned, but also we do bang the drum as officers regularly about these. You know, let's look at the beyond the stereotype of what poverty looks like. Let's not always take urban solutions and plant them in our towns as well as our really rural areas. So there is that general dialogue. In terms of Families First, we have network meetings across the country, and we are asked for our experiences and our feedback. And I would certainly suggest that your specific comments should be incorporated into this consultation, and I can write them up and put them in the appropriate section. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Farley would like to know.
Thank you, Sarah. It's not, I'm sure, your doing that we're getting this so late, but I think it's really very unfortunate, and I think we should be grateful to the network of managers who have tried to put in some answers. But the obvious question is, well, who else might have been asked and should have been asked? Health Board, for example, is mentioned, but they don't seem to have fed anything in. And the same might well be true for other parts of our own organisation and partners. I think this leaves us in a difficult position, really. If this was to go in as it is, and I realise you're not suggesting that, actually, if this was to go in as it is, it would not be, I think, a proper response by the County Council. What it would be, quite rightly, and could be badged as such, is a response from a particular group of very active, very committed, and obviously very knowledgeable people. And I would be perfectly happy about that. At the same time, I would be disappointed that the Council is now not in a position to make a response. And even if we put in a few bits today, important as they might be, it's still going to be an unsatisfactory response. So I'm not quite sure what we do about it. One thought would be to see if we could have an extension, and at least to see if we could have the opportunity to look at a recast document before it goes off. So I'm happy that this goes off as a response to a consultation by the group that it's from. But I would be unhappy, even with some additions from us now this afternoon, for it to go off purporting to be from the County Council, because I just don't think it's good enough. And it's not good enough that it's come to us so late. But I emphasise what I said at the beginning. I'm not saying to you it's not good enough. You're the messenger on this one. And I appreciate what you've tried to do.
And I also must reiterate, of course, that it was brought for the beginning of January, but our meeting was cancelled. So therefore, we haven't had the month of January to actually consult about this. But yes, it is unfortunate that it's such a short timeline.
I should have, it was an omission from me, I should have stated that in an informal way, I have circulated it to the what we're loosely calling an anti-poverty working group, which is comprised of some partner colleagues, our Flying Start manager, these sort of key players. But again, absolutely reflecting your point about it, whether it's a representative response, is that no, it is limited, and I can certainly seek a deadline extension for a fuller response.
I thank you for that. I don't know what others think, because I'm not necessarily saying that I think we should have a meeting and make our own response. But I would sleep more easily at this desk if I thought that we'd got a broader range of views. I think what you've just said about gathering, as you've obviously already done, some other thoughts from that wider group is absolutely fine. I mean, I think if it's going to go in and meet the deadline, it just needs to be very clearly badged that this is the considered response of whoever, and clearly some very important professional networks. I don't want to minimise that at all. And it's perfectly possible that some of the things that we've said this afternoon will chime with that anyway. But I would just be unhappy at this going in as the response from Monmouthshire County Council.
Yes, I'd like to say that we are just we are the select committee, and we're one part of it. But I think our comments are going to be, I would like them to go forward. And I have requested perhaps, or I will request that the minutes for this part, Richard, can go straight to Will McLean, or as soon as possible, or to Sarah, sorry, whoever's going to actually do the response, so that you do have, you know, comments that you can use. Would that be all right?
That'd be really useful, and I will make that clear in our submission.
Yes. Right. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. If you look at agenda item 8, it says to scrutinise the report. This isn't a report. It really isn't. You know, if you look at question 5 and question 6, do you agree with the proposals we have set out under the next steps? What are they? You know, no comments come back. We can't possibly say we've scrutinised this because we haven't really, without seeing the full details, the faintest idea of really what it's all about. And I agree entirely with Peter. Scrutiny is not the right word. If we are going to scrutinise it, we need to see what this management group really had in front of them, you know, to give their answers. I don't necessarily agree with, you know, the Welsh Government's asked questions and we've said no to the first two and no comments to 5 and 6. So, you know, I'm totally in the dark. I wouldn't say that this is scrutiny as far as I'm concerned.
No, I think Will's idea, from what I gather, that he was going to bring it to us so that we could make comments on it. But it is so brief. My other comment is that why did Welsh Government bring it just before Christmas for a consultation period when it's, you know, well known that Christmas period is a holiday where very little is done? It seems to be such a short time.
No, the draft was issued in November. The structure of the, I won't call it report, cover note is mine. There's a hyperlink to the full consultation document, which I didn't want to put in paper form for you. And the style of it was an attempt to bring out the salient points. And I thought the feedback from the managers network may be a useful starting point to scrutinise what those projects on the ground, what their experiences are in Monmouthshire, obviously overlaid and supplemented by members' ward experience and sort of scrutiny function.
Yeah, yes, Councillor Brentman.
Just in terms of consultation, were you able to talk to kind of farmers' unions? Because I do know that farming in particular, when you're looking at deprivation, you know, it can be quite high, and rural deprivation as well. And whether there's a farmers' wives group who could contribute as well.
No, I haven't. They're not groups actually that I'm in touch with at all. We used to have a young farmers representative who was very active on the youth offer, and before that the Children and People's Partnership. But I believe their cuts have been quite severe. So even if we have a Monmouthshire representative, we're certainly not seeing them in meetings. But that's one for me to note. To look into.
The farmers' union certainly would help. Because, you know, they deal with this problem all the time. And they would have facts and figures which would really help. Yes, Councillor Powell.
Chairman. At the very bottom of page 84, it says other issues raised by the Families First Projects Manager Network include, and there's 3 things down there: poor mental health, access to childcare being a barrier to employment, and the importance of early education. And it would be a good thing if we could have an enlarged either report or answers to some of that at another meeting, do you think? To go into that because it has quite a...
So can I ask, what's the timelines for this? What happens now? It goes back to Welsh Government, and then what? Do they make it a policy? How long would that take?
I'm not sure
implement
I'm not sure their direct exact mechanism for how they deal with consultation responses. They've asked us to respond to these questions, and I will put in supplementary comments that don't quite fit there by the end of this week. And if they've publicised the next steps, I haven't seen them, but I'll find out. There are, of course, those sort of bigger anti-poverty discussions going on, regional workshops. So there is chance, certainly, for those wider discussions.
Will there be feedback to you directly, or MCC?
Yes, I will. I'll receive it, certainly. In terms of what happens to the overall strategy, I don't think they would typically respond to each authority on their submissions. No.
Right, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor.
Well, I go back to what I said. I'm now looking again, and with increasing dismay, at the scope of the original consultation document, which includes important things like the Children Act, which looks ahead to the imminent Public Health Act, which takes in the Wellbeing and Future Generations bill, which Will spoke to us about in Council. So my feeling is that for whatever reason, we can't give and should not give any response from this committee now. It would be too late and too scrambled. I am perfectly happy, personally, for the report that we've already, for the material that we've already got to be amplified along the lines that Sarah has suggested by using other inputs, and for that to go off, and possibly for us to receive copies of it at some point as the considered views of a number of players. I think that would be wholly right, but it would not in any way appear to come from the county council. But what I would go on to say, what a missed opportunity. Here is a fantastic piece of bringing together social policy, welfare reform. It goes all the way right up, should we be challenging this UK government on this, or asking DWP to, it's a huge thing, and you've been left with a very difficult job to do. So I would say, do what you've already started, which will be manageable, it'll be good, it'll be concise, it will be clear what it is, and let's hope that if we get another opportunity, and who knows, what other opportunities are we missing, that we could have spent our energy on or encouraged others to. So it's unsatisfactory in some ways, but could be turned into something useful and constructive with your help, Sarah.
Just agree. Matthew, would you like to come in here?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And if I just come in response to that point raised by Councillor Farley on the opportunities, members may be aware individually, if not as a committee, but the Welsh Government does have a consultation email circulation list. Now, I was just thinking, just tying back to the earlier item with the work programme coming in, but actually I'm just wondering if it may be an opportunity in terms of your work programme, that if some form of watch at an officer level could be kept on that on your behalf, that if there are consultation issues coming up that fit within the remit of this committee, we would have sort of early sight of them and perhaps an opportunity then to engage more fully the work of the committee. Because what I would say is, I mean, there are at any one time perhaps half a dozen consultations running, which is too much perhaps for any one individual committee, but in terms of picking those areas where there is greatest impact with the policy direction of Monmouthshire Council and the work programme of this committee, it might afford an opportunity for more extensive discussion.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, you mean that it could come directly to our committee as opposed to somebody like Will and who's in a policy and partnership and Sarah and people, because their remit is so large in other areas that we could actually discuss it alongside you. Alongside you, obviously. But yes, Matthew.
Apologies. what that may in effect do is just give us a little bit of a heads up, and it may be that you then ask officers to respond to consultations or to bring a particular piece of information. So I'm not saying it would mean that that response would be left entirely to the committee and Hazel in terms of that role to deliver, but it would just give us a little bit more forward planning on the opportunities which could be there to get involved.
That's an excellent idea. Thank you. I think, Hazel, shall we request that it
I think
we
we
need
need
to
to discuss it,
Yes.
Chair, but
Okay.
I agree that there needs to be a mechanism whereby such consultations are
Yeah.
forwarded to us in good time
Exactly.
for us to
Yes.
enable us to respond.
Yes. Good idea.
Sorry,
Yes,
but,
Councillor Farley.
but I think Matt's made a very helpful suggestion, but Hazel's right to be cautious. We need to. The question actually isn't really for this committee. The question is for the council as a whole, how it responds, if it wishes to respond at all, to Welsh Government consultations. And we have exactly the same dilemma on the town council, where I'm a member. And we've set up a separate little committee to look at consultations. And actually, by and large, our conclusion on most of them is life is too short. Yeah. But we do need some sort of filter, because there could be things that would be very useful. My sense is that this actually is potentially a very useful opportunity, and thank goodness something will be going in. But we do need to consider carefully, and a scrutiny committee ought to be scrutinising the response. I think the idea was right. Not creating the response, because it can't kind of scrutinise it. Do you know what I mean? We need to think as a council, and maybe this is something ultimately for coordinating board chair that we can raise to just talk about it, because I think we've been almost caught out on this one through nobody's fault.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Farley. I think that actually Will did actually say that there was actually no need to bring this to scrutiny, but he felt that he wanted to bring it to scrutiny. So, so thankfully we've had a glimpse of it. Otherwise it could have bypassed us totally. So yes, I think with our comments and with all the comments that have been made today, perhaps we can work on them in the future. But I would like to thank you, Sarah, for doing this. And it's been really helpful. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just to reassure members, really, that that these issues are being considered in a broader, wider sense. And I'm sure members will recall, I think full council recently considered the latest WIMD deprivation statistics. Poverty, anti-poverty, tackling poverty, however we talk about it, is constantly on the agenda. We're standing more scrutiny, deeper scrutiny, and it is on the council planner that we look at presenting some sort of strategic response, which will probably be a local strategy. So just to reassure you that it's not just sitting in a confined area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for